Marcus Chen paced his Manhattan office, watching rain streak the windows. At 32, he'd built Chen Industries into a billion-dollar empire, but his biggest deal was crumbling. Harold Peterson, worth $3 billion, had made it clear. He only did business with stable family men. Marcus's bachelor status was costing him everything. "I have the perfect solution," said Helena Rodriguez, his elite matchmaking consultant, sliding a folder across his marble desk. "Emma Sullivan, 28, music teacher from Brooklyn. She's been blind since birth, which actually works in your favor. She can't be impressed by your wealth. And she desperately needs exactly $200,000. For what? Her younger brother Jake needs experimental spinal surgery. He's been wheelchair-bound for 3 years. Insurance won't cover it." 2 hours later, Marcus stood outside a modest music school in Brooklyn, listening to hauntingly beautiful piano music drifting through the windows. When he knocked, the music stopped. "Come in," came a confident, warm voice. Emma Sullivan sat at an old upright piano, afternoon sunlight highlighting her dark hair. When she turned toward him, her striking green eyes didn't quite meet his, but her attention was completely focused on him. "You must be Marcus Chen," she said, standing gracefully. "Helena explained your rather unusual proposition. You need a fake girlfriend for 6 months to impress business partners, and I need money for my brother's surgery. $200,000, correct?" Marcus was immediately struck by her directness and composure. "Yes. It would involve corporate events, charity galas, business dinners. Nothing inappropriate, just public appearances where I need a companion who can hold intelligent conversations." Emma's fingers absently traced the piano keys. "Tell me about my brother first," she said. "Jake is 19, pre-med at NYU. He wants to be a neurologist, says if he can't fix his own spine, maybe he can help fix someone else's. This surgery could restore his mobility and eliminate the chronic pain that's been getting worse every month." The genuine love and worry in her voice were unmistakable. "Can you handle high-pressure social situations?" Marcus asked. "Corporate events can be challenging." Emma smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face. "Mr. Chen, I've been navigating the world without sight for 28 years. I graduated summa cum laude from Columbia, speak 3 languages, and teach music to everyone from children to business executives. I think I can manage conversations about art, current events, or business strategy." Marcus felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment at his assumption. "There would need to be clear boundaries," Emma continued professionally. "No physical intimacy beyond what's necessary for public appearances, hand-holding, perhaps a kiss on the cheek for photographs. I'll play the role convincingly, but I won't compromise my personal values. And Jake can never know this is a business arrangement." "Completely understood. Helena mentioned you specifically wouldn't be seduced by wealth or status. Why is that important to me?" Marcus found himself being unusually honest. "I've had relationships that turned out to be less than genuine. Women who were more interested in my bank account than in me as a person." Emma turned toward him, and for a moment, Marcus felt she could see directly into his soul. "Mr. Chen, your money doesn't intimidate me because I can't see the designer clothes or luxury cars. Your social status doesn't impress me because I've never been part of that world. What I care about is whether you're someone I can trust and respect enough to spend 6 months convincing people I care about." She paused thoughtfully. "You're more considerate than I expected. You didn't assume I needed help navigating the room. But you're also profoundly lonely, and you're terrified that this Peterson deal has become more important to your sense of self-worth than any business transaction should be." Marcus stared at her, speechless. In 15 minutes, she had read him more accurately than people who'd known him for years. "So," Emma said with quiet confidence, "do we have a deal, Marcus Chen?" "We have a deal. But I want to meet Jake first. If I'm going to be part of this story, I want to understand what we're really fighting for." Emma's smile brightened genuinely. "I think that can definitely be arranged." As Marcus left the music school that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that this purely business arrangement was about to become something far more complicated than either of them anticipated. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood before his bedroom mirror, adjusting platinum cufflinks for the 3rd time. Tonight was the Peterson Industries charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Emma's debut as his girlfriend and their crucial first test. When Emma appeared at his penthouse door wearing an elegant navy evening gown, her dark hair professionally styled, Marcus was genuinely stunned. "You look absolutely beautiful," he said, meaning every word. "Thank you," Emma replied, her hand resting confidently on her guide dog Luna's harness. "I hope it's appropriate for Luna to accompany us." At the gala, Emma exceeded every expectation Marcus had dared to hope for. She handled the red carpet chaos with natural grace, charmed reporters with thoughtful responses, and navigated the crowd of Manhattan's most influential people as if she belonged there. "Peterson's at 2 o'clock, Marcus murmured as they approached the evening's most important targets. Distinguished gentleman with gray hair, navy tuxedo. "The woman with him is definitely his wife Margaret," Emma replied quietly. Slight southern accent, very warm laugh. She's been enthusiastically describing their golden retriever Max for the past several minutes. Marcus looked at her with surprise. "How could you possibly know that?" "I listen very carefully to everything around me. Mrs. Peterson has been telling everyone about Max's habit of stealing socks from their laundry room." When they finally met Harold and Margaret Peterson, Emma's social intelligence proved invaluable. "Harold, Margaret," Marcus said with practiced charm, "I'd like you to meet Emma Sullivan." "So you're the remarkable young woman who's captured our Marcus's attention," Harold Peterson said in his commanding voice. "It's wonderful to meet you both," Emma replied warmly. "Mrs. Peterson, I couldn't help overhearing your delightful stories about Max. I have a golden retriever myself. Luna here is my guide dog, and she has the exact same mischievous streak. Just last week I found her with an entire loaf of bread that had mysteriously disappeared from my kitchen counter." Margaret Peterson's face immediately lit up with genuine delight. Within minutes, Emma had completely charmed both Petersons, and Harold was nodding with obvious approval. Throughout the evening, Emma continued to impress everyone she met. She remembered names after single introductions, engaged in meaningful conversations about art and culture, and handled questions about their relationship with the perfect balance of affection and appropriate privacy. "You're absolutely incredible at this," Marcus whispered during a quiet moment as they admired ancient Egyptian artifacts. "It's really not so different from teaching," Emma explained. "It's fundamentally about reading the room, understanding what people need to hear, and finding genuine points of connection wherever possible." "Is that what you're doing with me right now? Finding genuine connections?" Emma turned toward him, and for a moment, the sophisticated party noise seemed to fade into background static. "That's becoming the real problem, Marcus. It's getting increasingly difficult to distinguish where the performance ends and authentic feelings begin." Before Marcus could formulate any response to this unexpectedly honest admission, they were interrupted by the evening's charity auction. Emma had been listening intently to the various programs being presented, and when a comprehensive music scholarship program for underprivileged children came up for bidding, she gently touched Marcus's arm. "That program sounds absolutely incredible," she whispered with obvious excitement. "I actually know several of the children they would be helping." Marcus didn't hesitate for even a moment. He raised his paddle confidently and within minutes had won the auction with a substantial bid of $50,000. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced to enthusiastic applause, "the music scholarship program has been generously won by Marcus Chen and Emma Sullivan." As applause filled the elegant museum space, Emma looked genuinely stunned. "Marcus, you didn't have to do that. That was an enormous amount of money." "Yes, I absolutely did have to," he replied, surprised by his own emotional certainty. "You were completely right. It's an incredible program." Later that evening, as their car glided through quiet Brooklyn streets, Emma was unusually contemplative. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked gently. "Tonight was quite overwhelming," she admitted honestly. "Positive, but emotionally intense. I'm not entirely sure I'll ever become comfortable with that level of public attention." "You were absolutely perfect tonight. Peterson was completely charmed, and Margaret already considers you family." Emma smiled tiredly. "The way you bid on that scholarship program without any hesitation, that wasn't for show, was it?" Marcus realized she was absolutely right. In that moment, he hadn't been thinking about impressing anyone or advancing any business agenda. He had simply wanted to support something that clearly mattered deeply to Emma. At her apartment building, standing under the warm glow of a vintage streetlight, Emma turned to face him directly. "Thank you for tonight," she said sincerely. And especially for the scholarship program. Those children will remember this opportunity for the rest of their lives. Thank you for making everything look effortless, Marcus replied. I honestly couldn't have managed any of this without you. Emma stepped closer, and for just a moment, Marcus thought she might actually kiss him. Instead, she rose gracefully on her tiptoes and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to his cheek. Good night, Marcus, she whispered. As Marcus rode back to Manhattan, he found himself unconsciously touching his cheek where her lips had been. The gesture had been part of their carefully orchestrated performance, but it had felt more genuine than most of the real relationships he'd experienced. 2 months into their arrangement, Marcus found himself leaving work early on a Friday afternoon, something completely unprecedented in his rigidly scheduled professional life. The Peterson deal was progressing better than his most optimistic projections, practically guaranteed at this point. But instead of feeling victorious, Marcus felt increasingly conflicted about their approaching 6-month deadline. He took Emma to dinner at a small, intimate Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village, deliberately chosen because it was far from their usual upscale business venues. This is really nice, Emma said with genuine pleasure as they settled into a cozy corner booth. Intimate and comfortable. I can actually hear you speak clearly. Too many of our previous dinners have felt like performances for an audience, Marcus replied honestly. I thought it might be refreshing to just be ourselves for once. Over plates of homemade pasta and glasses of excellent wine, they talked about subjects that had absolutely nothing to do with business strategies or their contractual arrangement. Emma shared animated stories about her students. Marcus opened up about his childhood and the parents he'd lost 5 years earlier. You don't often mention your parents, Emma observed gently. They died in a car accident while I was so completely focused on building the company that I kept postponing visits home. I kept thinking there would always be more time later. Emma reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. I'm so sorry. I understand that particular kind of regret. Is that why you've sacrificed so much for Jake? Partly. But also because he's genuinely brilliant and deserves every possible opportunity. He's going to help so many people once he becomes a doctor. Marcus turned his hand palm up, naturally interlacing their fingers. But what about what you deserve, Emma? What do you want for yourself? Emma was quiet for an unusually long moment. I used to dream about performing classical piano professionally. I was actually good enough to audition for prestigious conservatories, had some real opportunities. But when our parents died suddenly, Jake needed me more than I needed Carnegie Hall. Do you ever regret that choice? No, Emma said without hesitation. But I do sometimes wonder what might have been possible. After dinner, they walked slowly through Washington Square Park. The crisp autumn evening was perfect for strolling, and Emma had naturally tucked her arm through his. Marcus, Emma said as they settled on a bench near the iconic fountain, can I ask you something that's been weighing on my mind? Absolutely anything. What actually happens when this arrangement officially ends? When the Peterson deal closes and you no longer need a girlfriend for business purposes? It was the question Marcus had been dreading for weeks. In the beginning, the answer had seemed straightforward. They would part ways professionally, she would have money for Jake's surgery, he would have his crucial business deal. But now, the thought of not seeing Emma regularly felt like losing something fundamentally essential. I honestly don't know, he admitted with complete transparency. I realize that probably wasn't the answer you were hoping for, but it's the most honest response I can give. Emma nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that timeline constantly too. 6 months seemed like such a specific, manageable period when we started. Now it feels completely arbitrary. Exactly. Marcus studied her elegant profile in the soft glow of the park's vintage lamplights. Emma, what if I told you that somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like a business performance for me? She turned toward him with a serious expression. I would say that genuinely scares me, because it stopped feeling like acting for me 2 weeks ago. They sat together in comfortable silence, the weight of their mutual confession settling between them. Finally, Marcus spoke carefully. The Peterson deal will probably close officially within the next month. Harold's been dropping increasingly obvious hints that he's ready to sign all the final paperwork. And then what happens to us? Then I guess we figure out what's real and what was just very convincing performance. Emma stood abruptly. I should get home. Jake will worry if I'm out too late. Marcus sensed that he had pushed too hard into emotional territory that made Emma uncomfortable. Emma, please wait. No, it's completely fine, she said, but her voice had changed, becoming more guarded. This is just more complicated than either of us anticipated when we started. The next 2 weeks were emotionally torturous. Their public appearances continued seamlessly, a charity luncheon, an exclusive gallery opening, the Peterson family's elaborate Thanksgiving celebration, but the easy, natural intimacy was completely gone. Emma remained polite, charming, and absolutely perfect in her role, but Marcus could feel the deliberate distance she had created. Finally, the call Marcus had been both anticipating and dreading came through. Harold Peterson wanted to meet personally to finalize all merger details and sign the official contracts. Congratulations, son, Peterson said warmly as they shook hands in his impressive corner office. I'm genuinely impressed with what you've built. And I have to say, Emma has been an absolutely delightful addition to our social circle. Margaret is quite fond of her. She really is special, Marcus agreed, meaning every word. The contracts were officially signed that same afternoon. $3 billion, the biggest business deal of Marcus's entire career, and all he could think about was that his arrangement with Emma was now completely over. That evening, Marcus found himself standing outside the familiar music school in Brooklyn, listening to the hauntingly beautiful sound of piano music drifting through the tall windows. Emma was inside, back to her real life. When the music finally stopped, he gathered his courage and knocked. Marcus! Emma appeared in the doorway, genuine surprise evident. What are you doing here? The Peterson deal closed today. All contracts signed and finalized. Congratulations! That's exactly what you wanted, isn't it? I need to tell you something important, Marcus said, stepping into the familiar warmth of the music room. That first day when I hired you, I genuinely believed I was purchasing a 6-month performance. A business solution to a professional problem. Emma sat down at the piano bench, her hands folded carefully. And now I realize I wasn't hiring an actress. I was meeting the woman I had been unconsciously searching for my entire adult life, and I was too scared to admit it. Emma's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Marcus, please don't. I'm not finished, he said, moving closer with determination. You were absolutely right to be cautious about my motivations. I am a businessman, and I am used to getting what I want. But what I want now isn't something I can buy or negotiate for. What I want is you, not as an employee, but as someone who chooses to be with me because she genuinely cares about who I am when all the business deals are over. Emma stood and walked to the window, her back turned. And Jake's surgery is scheduled for next month, completely regardless of what happens between us personally. The money was never conditional on our relationship continuing, Emma. It was payment for services you more than earned. She turned around slowly, and Marcus was surprised to see tears flowing down her cheeks. You can't just appear here and say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because I've been trying so desperately hard not to fall in love with you, and you're making it completely impossible. Marcus crossed the room in 3 quick steps, gently cupping her face in his hands. Then please, stop trying to fight it. I love you too, she whispered through her emotion. I've been in love with you for weeks, and it's been absolutely killing me to pretend otherwise. Marcus leaned down and kissed her, soft and tentative at first, then with growing passion as she kissed him back with equal intensity. When they finally broke apart, Emma was smiling radiantly through her tears. So what happens now? She asked breathlessly. Now we stop performing, Marcus said with absolute conviction. We figure out what real looks like together. We take everything slowly and discover what develops when there's no contract and no business pressures. Emma laughed, the sound bright and genuinely joyful. That sounds absolutely terrifying and wonderful simultaneously. The best things in life usually are. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the exact same music school, but this time surrounded by loved ones. Jake was there, walking steadily on his own legs for the first time in years, his surgery having been completely successful. Helena beamed with pride at her most meaningful match. Even Harold and Margaret Peterson had come, having genuinely grown to love Emma. Emma sat at the familiar piano wearing a simple white dress, playing the same hauntingly beautiful piece he had heard that very first day. When the music ended, Marcus stepped forward and took her hand. "Emma Sullivan," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the small room, "6 months ago, I hired you to pretend to be my girlfriend. It was unquestionably the best business decision I ever made, because it led me directly to the love of my life." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring chosen not for its size but because its intricate design reminded him of musical notation, delicate, complex, and beautiful. "Will you marry me? Not as part of any arrangement or contract, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Emma's smile could have illuminated the entire city. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with pure joy. "Yes, of course, absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss his fiancée, the small room erupted in enthusiastic celebration. But neither heard any of it, lost in the profound realization that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most practical reasons. Later, as celebration continued around them, Emma pulled Marcus aside. "Can I tell you a secret?" she whispered with delight. "Always and forever. I knew this wasn't just business any more weeks ago." "How could you possibly have known?" Emma smiled, her hand finding his cheek with practiced ease. "The way your voice changed when you talked to me versus everyone else. The way you remembered tiny details about my preferences. And most tellingly, the way your breathing pattern changed whenever I was close to you." Marcus shook his head in continued amazement. "You really do see absolutely everything." "I see you," Emma replied with complete sincerity. "The real you." "So what now, Ms. Sullivan?" Marcus asked, using the formal address that had started their unlikely journey. "Now, Mr. Chen, we write our own story. No contracts, no timelines, no performances required. Just us." "Just us," Emma agreed, rising to kiss the man who had started as her employer and become her forever. As the autumn sun set over Brooklyn, Marcus Chen finally understood that the best business deal of his life hadn't been the Peterson merger. It had been the day he hired a blind girl to act as his girlfriend, only to discover that the heart doesn't negotiate, it simply knows what it needs.